I discovered 16 bodies in the woods. I hadn't planned on telling this story, and honestly I had forgotten about it for years. But something I saw on the news recently made my skin crawl, and now I can't get it out of my head. I was around 15 or 16 when it happened, and I used to walk in the woods a lot. I loved horror movies and anything spooky, so the woods didn't scare me. My parents, however, hated it. There had been a lot of disappearances in our town, kids who went into the woods and never came back. But those stories only made me more curious. I wanted to know what had happened to them. One day, I went deeper into the woods than I'd ever gone before. I stumbled upon a rundown house. It looked like an old resort, but it had clearly been abandoned for years at least. That's what I thought. I decided to explore it. As I walked inside, I started hearing banging noises. A bit uneasy but still curious, I kept looking around until I reached a door. It was freshly painted, a nice dark blue. The noises were getting louder behind it, and I couldn't resist opening it. I quietly pushed the door open and slowly walked down a set of stairs. The sounds I'd been hearing became clear. There was a frail little girl, younger than me, with matted dark hair and stained clothes. She was cutting apples, and there were several pies on the table next to her. I ducked my head, hoping she wouldn't see me, but then I heard a man's voice. It was raspy, like he'd smoked all his life. He called for the girl to bring him a pie. She grabbed one, but as she was about to bring it to him, she dropped it. She looked terrified. Without thinking, I ran down the stairs to help her pick it up. She glanced at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Are you real? Are you alive?" I nodded, but before I could respond, I noticed something strange, a transparent figure standing near us. It was a boy, and I realized I could see through him. He told me he was trapped here and couldn't leave. He shared the horrifying things he had endured, too gruesome to describe, and then said he was dead. That's when I recognized him. He was David, one of the kids who had gone missing. We'd talked a few times before he disappeared. No one knew what had happened to him, but I had found him. He warned me to run and never look back, but I couldn't just leave the girl behind. Before I could say anything, I heard the man's voice again. He was furious because the girl had dropped his pie, and he started coming towards us. The girl whispered, "Run, or you'll be trapped here like me," and David, I grabbed her hand, pulled her up, and we ran. We sprinted through the abandoned resort and out into the woods, the man chasing us. We didn't stop until we reached the street, where it was dark and the streetlights flickered dimly. Out of breath and terrified, we ran to my house. When we arrived, police cars were parked outside, and my mom ran to hug me as soon as she saw me. I told her everything, and then I had to repeat the story to the police. I explained why the girl's hair was matted and her clothes were stained. She told the police everything she knew, including her name, Rosie. The police went into the woods and found the abandoned resort. In the basement, they discovered 15 bodies, an elderly man and 14 children. The bodies were too horrifically mutilated to describe, but they were almost certainly the missing kids, except for one. They never found David's body. Years have passed since that day. Rosie and I are still close, but no one ever really figured out what happened. Then, a few weeks ago, some kids were playing in the woods I used to walk through. After what happened, my parents forbade me from going back, and I had no desire to return. The kids came across the old resort. It had been boarded up for years, but they found a hole in the ground. It was covered in grass and leaves, but they dug it up and found a skeleton. They ran out of the woods and called the police. The body was too decayed to identify, but they said it was a teenage boy, around 13 to 16 years old. I knew it had to be David. I've been thinking of going back home this summer, back to the woods, to see if I can find any answers to what happened all those years ago.